and chat live. So far, we've seen where it just gets too much noise, and then it's hard to understand, but be happy to entertain that when the time comes. We also can chat right now. To sign it, it required a passcode to share with the CRs in case we can email. Okay, great. All right. Everybody got their wines ready to go. Give it a few more minutes. Good stuff, that's for sure. Trying to get into some stories about who these people are, who made them, where they're made, what I thought was interesting about them, and why we chose them. And we just got back from Napa yesterday morning on another purchasing tour and podcast tour. If you hadn't had a chance to listen to the podcast at Wine Talks with Paul K, it's available on most podcast platforms. And man, we are getting some amazing guests on this show. Had a wonderful time this morning with a old school winemaker who's making gorgeous wines for the Wilson Daniels Group. But I'm learning more podcasting than I have in all the years of all the books I've read and all the tastings I've been to, because you get a chance to really peel back people's opinions and their commitment to the industry and their passion for what we're doing here. So we hope you chime in on that. We'll give everybody a few more minutes. It's 4:03. I wonder if we should just turn on those are self-muted, Connor? The guests? Okay. They can unmute. Okay. I think right now, because it's not a huge crowd, we'll unmute everybody. If you want to ask a question, then you can. I would like to be able to see anybody if they want to chime in that way. It's kind of weird talking to a camera and not to some faces, but that's okay. I can do that. I can do that too. We have some questions as well along the way, so that'll be interesting. I see a wonderful paneled wall there. Where are you folks? What town? Ask to unmute. There you
go. We're from Lake Mills, Wisconsin.
Wow. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. We're glad to be here.
So it was 39 degrees in Napa over the weekend, and it was 7 degrees in Albany, New York 2 weeks ago. What's happening in Wisconsin right now?
We were about at 4 degrees this morning or today, 4 to 10.
4 to 10,
Yeah, give or take.
We had that ice yesterday, ice and snow.
Ooh.
Storms.
Any ice fishing going on right now?
Yes.
We're not ice fishers, but there are people who are fishing.
I'm not sure I get the attraction, frankly.
No.
Okay, well, we've got about 6 guests here, so we'll get started. You have the 4 wines in front of you. I'm looking for feedback too on the format of this to see if we can improve it as we go along. This is our first one of a series. We're going to be doing. We did this California Reds. We're going to do Bordeaux coming up. We're going to do Pinot Noir. So we're going to be working on the different groups and different groups of wine. There's Annie just logged in.
Trying to say hello. There's about 8 of us here in Florida.
How are you folks?
Good We're doing great. I don't know how to turn the camera. Sorry, we'll just see you.
Well, I see your thumb.
There we go.
There you go. Where?
I see an echo.
Can you? You can't see him. Can people see it? See it?
Mom's hand's covering it. There you go. Oh, you gotta flip it over, Mom. Flip the iPad. There you go. All right. Hello from Largo, Florida.
Welcome to the show. Thank you for logging in. Great.
So what wine can we start drinking?
Well, listen, you didn't have to wait for me. You can start drinking anytime you want. However, we're going to start with the roots. So I'm getting a feedback on this. We're going to mute everybody just temporarily until you have a question. If you have a question, you can unmute and go ahead and ask the question. So we're gonna talk about wine tasting. We're gonna talk about how to wine taste. We're gonna talk about what to look for when you're tasting. We're gonna talk about the history of these wines. And since we're anxious to get started because you're kind enough to wait to start drinking, let's get started. What you want to do in general when you're tasting wine is drink from lightest to heaviest, and you want to drink from oldest to youngest. But the lightest to heaviest is the most pertinent because older wines tend to be lighter anyway. So we're going to start with the Pinot Noir from Sonoma County from my good friend, Mr. Roots, Keith Roots. So you can start pouring and start doing whatever you want. I'm not sure what kind of glasses you all have. I just brought this so you can see. The little glass is an engineered glass for tasting. It's lousy for drinking wine, but it's great for understanding and evaluating wine, and that's what we use here every Tuesday when we taste wines. And then, of course, your regular, what they call Bordeaux Goblet or Claret Goblet, is what you want to use to enjoy a glass of wine, and that's comes in many shapes and sizes. But this particular shape is for things like Cabernet, Zinfandel, Syrah, stuff like that. A more bulbous shaped glass that you might see that's got a fatter bottom would be for Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. So I'm going to use my INAO tasting glass. And so the Roots, Keith Roots, who made this Roots wine, was a very well-known winemaker in his day, and I'm talking about the 80s and 90s. He got out of the business for some reason, and he decided to get back in, and about 5 years ago. So he found a financial partner, and he started making wine again. And he started making wine in a price range that was very affordable. And this is, I think, one of the great examples of what he's been doing lately, being that one, Pinot Noir is a tricky grape. It's an expensive grape. It grows all over the world, but it's very finicky on where it grows and what it tastes like when it's done. And so I think this is a classic example. I prefer wines from the Sonoma Valley when it comes to Pinot Noir. I think they're more expressive. I think they have more character. I think they're more voluminous in your mouth. They have more flavor profile than its Napa Valley counterparts. But we'll leave that for you to decide. Who likes Pinot Noir in this group? I mean, guys, in general, do you drink Pinot Noir? There's a hand. So what you want to do is first you want to look at the color of the wine. And what are you looking for when you're looking for color? You're generally looking to see if it's cloudy. And if it is cloudy and the wine is filtered, this is a problem. If the wine bottle says unfined and unfiltered, then it might be cloudy, and that's okay. That's what the winemaker intended to happen. So wines will go through a filtering or a fining process. Fining is the process of actually dropping another substance into the barrel and having the particles of the wine they're negatively charged and positively charged, and they attract to each other, and the particles are removed through that. And one of the most common fining agents is egg whites. So not only can you drink a glass of wine, you can make an omelet afterwards that has, I'm just joking. So, so if the wine, if in this case we've got a wonderful ruby red, maybe a little dark magenta, it's very clear. It looks like it's going to be a pretty good glass of wine. It's a 2018, so we shouldn't see any bottle age, any orange trim on it, any orange edges, and ready to swirl it around. Why do we swirl it? To break up the molecules, to give a little oxygen, to bring the character of the wine to the top of the glass, so that when we smell it, we're sort of getting a full dose of what's in store for us when we taste it. And wine should be, the nose of the wine should reflect its character. In fact, it's often said that the taste should confirm the nose. That's what we're looking for. So did I smell eucalyptus? Did I smell oak? Did I smell vanilla? Did I smell raspberries? Did I smell strawberries, which is a typical term for Pinot Noir? And then did I taste that? And so you should be really confirming with your palate what your nose senses. By the way, who's read this book or seen this movie? Sideways. And you all remember that the character Miles was a Pinot Noir fanatic, and he would only drink Pinot Noir, and of course clobbered Merlot sales, literally in the marketplace, ruined Merlot sales for years. I mean, literally years, because of this book, having drunk Pinot Noir. And turns out to be sort of a true story. The guy that wrote the book, his name was Rex Pickett. I had him on my podcast. When you read the story, it really is his life. A down and out writer, wasn't making any money, couldn't afford to go to a tasting bar, so he would go late. Hopefully the bartender would pour the rest of the empty bottles into his glass, and they would shoot the breeze and talk about wine. And he really went to Los Olivos. He really turned the sales volume of a hotel around. He really turned the sales volume of the Hitching Post restaurant around. But he'll be the first one to tell you I didn't make any money on the movie or that. So who knows? So this is the Pinot Noir. What do you smell? I get a little oak, a little vanilla in that nose. I get a little strawberry and a little raspberry fruit. But I'm also getting some kind of a little spice component that that's kind of interesting that you don't typically get. Sonoma County, which is a very, very large part of the wine country in California, it's much bigger than Napa, has a wide variety of microclimates. It can produce pretty intense Pinot Noir from the north and the Russian River, and very light, feminine, and elegant Pinot Noirs from the Petaluma Gap. This one is sort of a combination of that. It doesn't have a whole lot of volume, but it also has plenty of nose and character to carry it through. I have to spit, by the way. Is that disgusting? So it's a requirement of my palate. And my wife doesn't like it because I spit in the white sink and then it gets all red. So it's kind of a problem. But, what I like about this is nice and soft. It's balanced. Not a whole lot of acid, not a whole lot of fruit, not a whole lot of, mid-palate. Just nice, soft all the way through. Almost elegant in its structure. Easy to serve with a pork dish or pork is one of the most famous dishes for Pinot Noir, but a salmon's another one. A wood-fired salmon. I think it's really good. Any comments? You can also type. If you have any questions, you can ask me. You can see that in the chat bar there. You can unmute yourself if you have a question too. It's just as easy for me too. I had an interesting conversation today with the winemaker for a company called Rootstock, and he told me something I had never heard, and that was, and it confirmed something that happens all the time in my wine area, my tasting room, and that is sometimes I'll open a bottle of wine. I can open two wines the same day, a Cabernet, both from California, both from both from Napa, and I can leave them corked, and I can come back to them in a day, and they both seem pretty solid. But I can come back to them in 3 or 4 days, and one of them is failing faster than the other one. And they call this reductive, it's right here, reductive strength. And the reductive strength, this is really a geeky wine thing, but it's an important thing because you probably have opened wine at home and let it sit for a few days and then kind of go, hey, this doesn't taste so good. It's because of the winemaker's skill set in what they're trying to do and how much oxygen the wine got during fabrication. And then that will give us a resulting value to the wine's ability to last in the bottle without being open. Hey, Marissa, would you bring me some repours? I'm going to show you the folks what we have and what we use here at the Wine of the Month Club to store wines that we've opened and not consumed. which I'm going to assume with this group probably doesn't happen too often anyway. That's a joke. So, but we have a new product that actually really works. And I use it at home quite frequently, even with some of the most expensive wines we have at the Wine of the Month Club, which we just, if you can believe this, and it was Pinot Noir, and it was from France. We just sold a bottle for $7,500. One bottle. Not the kind of wine they pour with ice fishing in Wisconsin, right? Thank you. So this is a repour, and it's a great device. They're around $2 or $1.99 or something, and it's a little plastic rubber cork. If I can get it out of here. And you can't really see this, but there's a little piece of foil on the bottom. And what you do is you take the foil off after you open the bottle and you're ready to retire it for the evening. You just stick it in there. And it doesn't add anything to the wine. It's actually just absorbing the oxygen in the bottle. And it works. It really works. I've tested it with two exact same bottles that were drunk half, corked one with a regular cork, corked one with this, tasted it a week later. Huge difference in the quality of the wine. And then I did the same thing with a fresh bottle versus an aged bottle with this cork. A week later, again, very minimal differences between the wines that were stored with this repour versus the wine that hadn't even been opened yet. And so I'm a true believer in it. We have them here at the Wine of the Month Club available for sale. They come in 1-packs and 4-packs. I think the 4-pack is it's like $2.49 each, and they work. You know, obviously, if you're buying one of our sale wines for $3 or $4, you're not sure if you need to spend $4 to $2.50 to save it, but certainly with more expensive wines. And I've put some of my big Napa cabs, you know, the Camises of the world, with one of those, and they work great. So you should check that out if that's a problem around your home. So
are they reusable, or you just the one time it absorbs, then it's done?
Yeah, so that's a good question. They're good for one bottle. And so what you would do is you would cork that bottle that first time. If you came back in 3 days and poured another glass, just keep the cork in the bottle as you're pouring, you know, in between pours, whatever. As long as it's not trying to suck up the oxygen throughout the room, it will last the value of a whole bottle. So 2 or 3 attempts. But once the bottle's consumed, then it's determined that repour has probably absorbed everything. It's like a sponge, you know. Once it's full, it's done. But they're great. We've over the years we've tried them all: the Vacuvin and the Coravin, which is really expensive. We've tried the sprayer, which you never seem to get the 16,000 sprays they tell you they get out of each can. You only get like 5, and then it seems to run out with argon. But at the winery, the wines are bottled without oxygen. There's argon in the bottle as it's being filled, so that even the ullage here, the space between the cork and the bottle is not oxygen. It's argon or nitrogen. So, but they're great products. So for the Roots Pinot, any comments on that? I'm going to guess that wine has a little bit of residual sugar, not a lot to detect. You can detect, the human tongue can detect like starting at 2% sugar and then anything after that, but under that it's very hard to tell. And it's usually added, if it is added, for just to soften it a little bit, make it more approachable. A lot of the wines like our good friend Snoop Dogg's Cali Red, which is disgusting, is like all sugar, right? It's probably like 10% sugar, probably 8% sugar, something like that. So almost a dessert wine, 5%. So that's a little rough. All right, we're gonna go to the next one, which is the Bent Press. I thought this, when I bought the wine, was extraordinary value. 2017 California. So Mr. Meadowcroft, who made this wine, has been in the wine business forever, and he has sourced grapes from all over the country, all over the state, to make his wines over the years, from the Mondavi estates to some of the great the vineyards of California. So when a wine is labeled California, like this one is, it means that they can buy grapes from from Eureka down to, Calexico. There's not a whole lot of growing regions in some of those places, but they could do it if they wanted to. And there's two reasons why you would label something California. One is if you are buying your grapes from Sonoma every year and you label the Sonoma, the next year you buy your grapes from Napa, you have to go back to the federal government and say, I'm changing the label. We're going to say Napa instead of Sonoma. And then it takes a couple of weeks to get approved. They have to reprint them and all these things are going. If you just change the vintage on a label for a wine, you don't have to have that reapproved. And so this gives winemakers the flexibility to contract out other vineyards throughout the state and not have to worry about reprocessing the label and going through the TTB to do it. The other reason is it gives them more flexibility to buy grapes in general where they buy their grapes, because they're trying to blend the best they can blend for the amount of money they want to spend and charge for the wine. But this bent press, to me, I'm going to say that the grapes came from predominantly one region, and I'm going to say the Central Coast in general. And that can happen. The wine could be 75% Central Coast and 25% Temecula, whatever. It doesn't really matter as long as it says California, they're fine. I think the rule is if you put Sonoma or Napa or an appellation, it has to be, I think, 85% from that area. Unlike the brand or the label saying Cabernet Sauvignon, then it has to be 75% Cabernet Sauvignon before you can call it that. Anything less than that, it has to be a red blend of some sort. Some other name, you can make it up. But so the grape percentage is different than the region percentage as far as the federal government's concerned about labeling things. So let's pour that bent press. And I think what you're going to find when you look at this color is completely unindicative of the volume of wine you're going to taste. So it looks a little lighter. It's got a gorgeous color. It's very clear. It shows a little bottle age. In other words, you start to see a little ruby red instead of that magenta on the edges. And that's the first thing that happens, by the way, when you're tasting a wine or you're looking at an aging wine, is that the color starts to change at the edges, not in the volume of the wine. So sometimes you'll get a different hue of red in the middle than the tone of the red at the edges. And so in this case, you get just a little bit of brick color at the edge, but not enough. It was a 2017, so it's been in the bottle for 4 years. But you can see in the nose is way more expressive than what the color suggests. I get cassis. Who knows what cassis tastes like? Anybody? You use that term all the time, and no one ever knows what it means. It's that small little fruit, grape-like fruit, raisin-like. I think it's great, this bottle of wine. One of my favorite deals this year, or last year.
You must have sent this one in that, you sent it in maybe the package that you made up of the reds.
Yes.
Because we had this last weekend. We opened it and we loved it. I was going to order more and then was happy that it came in this box.
I'm glad that happened. Yeah, I think it's really good value. So there's more, actually. We have a sale going on right now, everybody. That's pretty amazing. I'll tell you why we have so much wine in stock. And my wife is the CPA, and she's the controller here. She's been with us for 25 years. And we ended up the year with a little more volume because COVID was very good to us, digital, the online wine market. And so we were buying lots of wine to make sure we had inventory. And so we had to put a bunch on sale this first quarter to get the warehouse thinned out a little bit because wine sales are, they're settled down a little bit post-COVID. But rest assured, all great wines, great values, and more to come as we go through this year. I'm very happy with the things we've procured coming up. The supply chain has affected us greatly. We had a container of wine get left in the Panama Canal. It was coming from Chile. They unloaded the boat, and they decided not to put it back on the boat, or they forgot. And then the boat arrived in Long Beach and waited in line to find out that the wine wasn't on there. So that was a problem. The glass for these wines, just to put it in perspective, a typical glass bottle like this with a small punt, It's called a claret bottle, whether it's a screw cap or a cork finish, doesn't matter. Runs about $8 a case just for the glass, not the box or the cork or the label or anything like that, just for the bottle itself. And now they're running about 16, if you can find it. Everybody's short. These regular staple products of our industry are being shorted, every one of them, except labels. That doesn't seem to be a problem. But one of the wines, which is not in this group here, we just had bottled. It was gorgeous Cabernet from winery in Lake Dunnigan Hills. They just put it in a screw cap. That's all they had left. They couldn't. I wanted a cork finish, but they had to put it in a screw cap. That's all they had. So I had no choice. If I wanted to buy the wine, it had to go in a screw cap. So any questions about screw caps versus synthetic cork versus, all these other crazy things going on out there? The synopsis is screw caps are actually better when it comes to short-term use of the wine. You can open it, you can close it. It doesn't affect the wine. It's inert. There's no natural product touching the wine, like a cork can be tainted and destroy a wine very quickly. So we've not experimented with long-term aging in a screw cap. You'll never see the great brands in a screw cap like Lafite Rothschild or Opus, stuff like that. But I think for us in the trade, the short-term 2-year, 3 or 4 year wines, it's a great closure. It works. There's no tainting. There's no problems with it. You can reclose it. You can do it. It's just functional. So, but do you have when I worked at my dad's liquor store in the 70s, boy, the only screw caps were Gallo, right? The 1.5 liter Gallo, and and so it got this negative vibe about it. It's slowly coming out, except for the woman the other day that called and told me that we ruined her corkscrew, and we said, what were you trying to open? She says, I was trying to open the wine, and the wine was a screw cap, and so she apparently tried to stick this corkscrew into the metal cap, and that was problematic for her. So anyway, what do you guys think of this? What in Wisconsin? What did we get out of this wine? Did we have steak with it, or what did we do with it?
I can't remember.
I think
We probably just think.
we might have had it with salmon. I can't remember what we.
That would work.
So I have to tell you, every weekend we get together and we have and I'm going to brag about, and I'm sure all of the people that are listening right now agree with me, every wine that you send us, because I do the
Wine of the month.
we do the one, well, yeah,
Yeah,
but
okay.
every wine you send, we like. And
Thank
so
you.
every weekend we get together and we share a bottle. So I think we had salmon. So
That would work with this because it's not a tannic Cabernet. It has some tannic acid. It has that finished dryness, but it's not really aggressive. So that would cut through the salmon. And I appreciate that comment. Maybe I should reflect on why this company exists and how it existed and why it came around. It was my father in 1972, and it wasn't because he needed to sell more bottles of wine out of his wine shop. When he bought his last pharmacy in 1969, he insisted that the gentleman sell him the liquor store, which is what it was, in Palos Verdes Estates, California, and the gentleman reluctantly did. And my dad became one of the premier wine shops in Southern California in the 70s during the heyday of the ascent of California wine in the world stage. And he was just an academic guy. He just liked studying things, and so he took trips to Napa regularly in the 70s to learn and to understand. Went to Germany, went to classes, spent many days in France doing the same. And so he decided that it was time. People didn't understand wine that came in the shop. We had a lot of executives from the aerospace firms that were in El Segundo, California, where Boeing is, and Garrett Research and all these companies. And people would be coming for dinner. What do I serve? So he started choosing 2 bottles of wine at the beginning of the month and put them on display. And I have a picture from 1975 of my father sitting in front of that display or standing. The other reason, maybe the more realistic reason that he started doing it, is because if you walk out the back door of the photograph that we have on the website, you can make a left turn and you end up in the pharmacy where he was counting pills. Well, it turns out that people come to the liquor store were happier than the ones coming into the pharmacy, because the people coming to the pharmacy were tired, aching, and sore, and had just come from the doctor, and the ones that come to the liquor store, were happy and ready to party. And so that just was more attractive group of people to hang out with. And so he started making the selections. The selections then came from a Tuesday night tasting that became one of the social events of Palos Verdes Estates at the time. It was a small community, it's a beach community, it's an affluent community, and people started signing up to taste wine with him on Tuesday night, which is my job, was to set that tasting up in the loft of the store, and that's where they would select the monthly selections for the club. And that was all the way through the 80s when he sold the business to me, actually. And it's also the reason why I still taste on Tuesdays. I start at 9 o'clock in the morning, I finish at 3. I usually end up tasting between 65 and 75 wines. I take 1 hour lunch break, and I taste everything that comes in here, whether it smells like hell or not, because you can't learn unless you taste the stuff that's bad as well. And somewhere along the line, I tasted nearly 100,000 wines doing it. And so you kind of get it. Even I can learn something after tasting 100,000 wines. And that's why we do it. And that's why we think the selections are solid examples of what they're supposed to be. And, you know, there are a lot. You can buy wine on Groupon. You can get, I don't know. I think I saw during Christmas like 15 wines for $38 or something. I mean, it's like, what is? You know what that is? I mean, that's what you get. You're not going to get curated, interesting wines that way. It's impossible, just by the logistics of the business. So that's the main pitch of what we do. Let's open this Conjecture. This is a Cork finished wine. This wine was actually part of our Napa club, and I just think it's fabulous for the price. As you know, Napa is very expensive. You can get wines at Opus for $450. You can get wines at other places for more. You can get wines in the 20s, and the wines in the 20s can be very good. The general issue with Napa Valley is the premium vineyards in 2018, the number I know, it was $8,000 for a ton of grapes. And what does that mean? That means just for the wine inside of this bottle, not this one, but a bottle, if you paid $8,000 a ton, would be around $80. Just for the juice. Forget the glass and the profit. So that's really expensive. It's hard to make money for a winery that has to charge that. So here's a Napa Valley Cabernet that we found from a winery called Art to Farm, and it's I think we sold it for $25 or $27. It's called Conjecture. It is a brand of ours. The federal government associates Conjecture with the Wine of the Month Club as a company. No oak in this. No, this is rounding out as time goes on. So you'll sense, first of all, the color. You'll see it's a little deeper than the bent press, showing really no changes in tone to the edges. 2018, it's a year younger. But I think you'll sense a little bit more pedigree in the character of the wine. There's no spiciness from the oak or vanilla, but there's certainly a wonderful fruit component in the structure of the wine. What's the structure of the wine? It's a very important word amongst wine aficionados. The structure. How is it built? How does it flow from the beginning to the end? Is it firm? Is it soft? Is it blend well? All the pieces that go into the things you sense and try and describe would relate to the structure of the wine. And so we have, in the color on the notes, we have medium magenta, we have black cherry, which I think is a great description. Black cherry in the nose. And my editor wrote firm tannins. What does that mean? So we can make stuff up, but firm tannins means that you're not getting that terry cloth in the mouth character that you get from some really aggressive wines, but it's not taking you in a bunch of different directions. It's just right there. You can sense that there's acid in there, but it's not overwhelming, and it's not soft. It doesn't feel soft and supple. It feels hard. Can you see that, by the way? I'm trying to spit so you don't see it. But do you get the fruit impressions on this? I'm looking at the screen here. I can look there. So, any questions? No questions. I think this is fabulous.
Sure.
We have a question.
Yes.
We have a question.
Hello. So my mom always has told me that, the legs on the wine glass are important. Why are these things important?
Was your mom there?
Yes, she
I'm
is.
here, and I don't know why
She's
they're important.
Annie.
And her friend is here.
My
too.
name is Annie, and my
Annie.
friend Jerry wants to know why the legs are important too.
I don't want to embarrass anybody. So I'm
Okay. It's okay. No issues.
It's not important.
well, it's really just a expression of the alcohol content. It's the glycol. It makes it stick to the thing. It doesn't mean anything. You can have wonderful wines that don't stick at all to the glass, and you have wines that are thick and not very good that stick to the glass.
So
So
it's a percentage of the alcohol then, or
Yeah,
just glycol?
it's actually it's actually the glycol, which is a part of the alcohol.
Is that sugar alcohol or something? Glycol?
Glycol, yeah. I'm not a chemist, so I don't know exactly how that plays out, but it's from the terms of the wine side of things, it's irrelevant to its quality factor. Doesn't mean a thing.
Yeah, thank you.
Now about the screw top.
Oh yeah, he talked about that already.
I
We
didn't
did?
hear it.
We didn't hear it. You can tell him about this.
Go ahead, ask the question.
Okay, go ahead, ask it.
Ask her the question again so we hear it.
Oh, I'm done.
No, it was about the screw top.
Okay.
You already discussed that.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Well,
Missed it.
Well, we discussed it a little bit. The screw top is
the cork versus
it's
the
here to
screw
stay.
top.
It's going to be something that people use for wines that are generally consumed or meant to be consumed in the first 24 to 36 months that they're bottled. They're not generally bottled with screw caps if the winemaker thinks they're going to be aged. And by the way, 90% of wine made in America is consumed in the first 24 months after it hits the shelf. So the life of a bottle of wine in the market is not very long. And so the screw cap is a great way to have a resealable package and zero tainting, what they call cork taint, zero degradation on the wine because of inferior cork, which is a huge problem. Somewhere around 7% of cork is inferior. It will taint the wine. Fortunately, the one I opened just now, the conjecture of the cork was good. So, which is a good question. This is the question. It's not the screw cap. It's like the cork. What's the problem with the cork? And so this conjecture, if you've all opened it, this is called a straight shank cork. It's actually not the highest quality cork that they make, but it's pretty good. And you'll see that there's spots on it, and those spots are filled with silicone or some kind of chemical or some kind of filler, because if they don't, then it'll leak. Cork is a piece of bark. I should have brought that with me. I have. It's literally a piece of bark that's been sickled off of a tree. They literally plug it with a device, and that becomes the cork. What they're doing now is they're harvesting the trees younger, so the cork is more porous. They fill it. They treat it with chemicals to keep the bacteria from growing, and they stick it in the bottle. Sometimes they don't get it all, and a cork goes bad. In all the years I've been tasting wine, and that's 30-something years, I've only had 2 wines literally come in my office that were vinegar, because that's not the same as a bad wine. Vinegar is a bacteria, and it will ruin a winery if the bacteria is in the air when you're bottling wine, and that's what becomes vinegar. But that's not what happens to bad wine. Wine just goes bad, just ages out of itself. All the wines you see here are selections from the Wine of the Month Club from back to the 70s. You can drink them. They don't taste very good, but they're not vinegar because there's no bacteria in the winery or in the bottle when it happened. But what happens is a cork goes bad. There's bacteria in the cork, not vinegar bacteria, but regular bacteria that just taints the wine. And that's the one thing that is the easiest to tell when you go to a restaurant, and you must send back what they call a corked wine if you smell old shoes or must or mold. That's what a corked wine tastes like or smells like, and then it has no fruit. When you taste it, it smells like it tastes like it smells, and then there's no fruit in it. It loses all its fruit. But fortunately, not the problem we have today, because this is really good. I really like this. Any comments on the conjecture? Napa Valley. This is all Napa Valley, which is rebounding, by the way, gracefully from the fires. Some wineries were lost, some vineyards were lost, but the fires, the vintages this year are pretty good. The volume's very good for 2021, so they recovered from that.
How long can this conjecture be aged in a refrigerated wine?
That's a good question. I would say that it'll continue to age because it's got plenty of fruit. It doesn't have a ton of acid, so I don't want it to go too long. I'd say another 5 years. And you'll see a nice bottle age come from this wine. The aging potential of a wine is it's a balance between how much acid and the kind of acid and the amount of fruit it has to work with to soften it out. And so this will turn to a nice bottle age component, which will have a little bit of a prune, a little dried fruit character, which I love. It's very Italian-esque in that way when wine ages, but my wife hates it, so figure that out. I don't know how we get along.
So going back to the bent press, for example, now that's a screw cap. So is there any value in aging that, or does it hurt to age it for a long time?
It won't hurt it. It'll probably age slower. The one thing about screw caps is they don't let it. If you look at the bottom of the screw cap, it's got a little membrane here, and they've been engineered to let a little bit of oxygen in, just like they should. I have had the luxury, which is pretty rare, to taste the same exact wine, both corked in a cap and in a cork, same juice, 5 years after it was bottled. There was a difference. Was one better than the other? No, it wasn't any better. It just had different character. One was brighter and fresher. The other one had more wonderful complexity from the age. So it doesn't necessarily make it better. But this has plenty of acid and lots of fruit. So I would say this has got easily 5 years of age to go. And the cork, the fact that it's using a screw cap won't affect it. It will age slower, actually, probably. But this is opening up. I don't know if you've tasted it since we first opened it, but it's changing in the glass. Actually, it's really good. A little bit of oak in that one. What time is it? We're having fun. Oh, wow, it's already 1:45. I wanted to turn you guys on a couple of things. I'm going to ask you a question from this book at the end, which is called "The Wine is the Best Medicine" by a real doctor, a French doctor, and we're going to find out what wine cures flatulence. And so that'll help everybody in the room. And then, but a couple of things happened in the world of wine that changed everything. And I'm going to give you the 3 books. And the first one was, of course, The Judgment of Paris in 1976. And this will be for a different podcast. But this is written by George Tabor, the only journalist that showed up to the tasting. I had Steven Spurrier on my podcast. He's on YouTube as well. The architect of the tasting. Wonderful, wonderful story. If it's a little wine geeky in some places, but the concept that we won and beat the French in 1976 in their own tasting is pretty fabulous. And in fact, I just interviewed the Barrett sisters 2 days ago in Napa. These are the granddaughters of the famed Chateau Montelena owner, who's in the book, of course. And so his granddaughters now make wine, and I had them on the podcast. So that was fun. So that was the first thing that happened. Then it took a few more years, but in 1990, when Morley Safer on 60 Minutes released The French Paradox, which is basically why the French live longer than we do, but eat goose liver fat and butter everything they get their hands on and drink, eat bechamel, which is flour, butter, and milk. But still live longer. And it has something to do with their lifestyle. It has something to do with their wine consumption. It has something to do with the foods they do eat as well. And so this is an interesting book, but it changed the retail side of red wine permanently. And up until that point at the Wine of the Month Club, we would sell a little bit more white than red. And now it's considerably more red than white. And that was immediate, almost immediate. And then the last major tome that changed how we look at wine and drink wine was, I already showed you this, the book Sideways, which literally ruined Merlot sales. It's taken until about now to rebound from that. And it's a funny story, but it wasn't funny for the Merlot growers. And the only ironic part of the story is if you've ever watched the movie, it's a little bit of a dark movie. At the end of the movie, Miles is sitting in a diner and he's got a plastic cup or a styrofoam cup and he's pouring a glass of 1962 Cheval Blanc. And Cheval Blanc is a Saint-Emilion wine, which is predominantly, if not 100% Merlot. So the irony of the movie is I'm never drinking Merlot, no effing way. And then at the end of the movie, he's drinking one of the great vintages of one of the great Bordeaux's that is purported to be 100% Merlot. So that's kind of fun. All right, the last wine is our Chasewater Sierra Foothills Zinfandel 2016. I am a huge fan of this brand. I've bought a lot from them over the years. They make gorgeous wines. These grapes are from the Sierra Foothills, which is a classic place for Zin. It makes spicy, bold, aggressive Zinfandel. I think that's what the grape should do. As you know, Zinfandel has a huge flexibility amongst its the offerings. It can make white Zinfandel, which of course is a sweet pink wine that famed by Sutter Home, but it does make extraordinarily complex, deep, tannic red wine, and this is one of those. The first wine from Chasewater that I've had at a screw cap, so I thought that was interesting. And this is organically grown. What does that mean? Anybody care to know if the wine's organically grown? You think it feels better? Better for you. It's an interesting thing. You have to be careful of what people label. A wine that's organically grown or grapes does not make the wine organic. They can harvest in the vineyard the way they want to harvest, but when they bring it into the winery, if they decide that they're going to do things that aren't part of the organic certification, they can do it. But they can still put on the label, made with organic grapes. So it's a little misleading in that way. It's not meant to be misleading, but it's something they're allowed to do. So this does have organic grapes, but it is not an organic wine. And I wrestle with this all the time because there are some very rustic wines out there, biodynamic wines, that I think are unpalatable. But it's a movement. People are interested in it. I think they really think they're doing themselves a favor by drinking them. But I don't think wine should be drunk that way. I think you should enjoy it and not stomach it because you think it's healthier for you, right?
Right.
That's true.
Yeah, I agree.
One of the interesting things that happens when I have these podcasts and I talk to particularly European winemakers, they'll say something like, my kids are crawling around in that vineyard during the week. I don't want pesticides in there. Pesticides are newer when it comes to the contemporary winemaking. The monks in the 12th century didn't have pesticides up until probably the 60s or 50s. We didn't use pesticides anyway. It wasn't part of the culture of wine. And then it was used to control pests and things. And then now we're going the other direction, as we are with our food, thank God. So you can have really, really good organically grown grapes in wines that are made organically because they've been doing it forever. And this is not new. The marketeers of the wine business are trying to make it new, but it's not new. There are 76 things you can put in a wine when you're making it in California, in America, and you can elect as a winemaker to put all of them in or none of them in. And the responsible winemakers are going to put none of them. If they're going to put anything, they'll put a little sulfur, and the sulfur is organic. It's natural. There's nothing unnatural about the sulfur they put in a wine to preserve it. That's totally normal. Sulfur comes from fermentation anyway. So there's always sulfur. You can't have a sulfur-free wine. It's impossible because it's part of the fermentation process. So you can't be duped into some of these marketing angles. The wine I tasted today with Vance Rose is his name, a winemaker for a company called Rootstock. Gorgeous wines. He goes, I put two things in my wines. I put grapes and I put a little sulfur dioxide. And the sulfur dioxide is natural. That's all I put in there. I don't put sugar. I don't put mega red. I don't color it. I don't put anti-foaming agents. I don't put anything. I don't use any yeasts. The grapes. There was a winery in Paso called Castoro Cellars. They used to make white Zinfandel grape juice in a wine bottle with a cork finish. He said the hardest part of it making the grape juice was stopping it from fermenting because it wants to ferment on its own. So Mr. Rose does not put in inoculated yeast. He doesn't buy yeast from a catalog and put it in the wine. He doesn't need to. The grapes ferment on their own. And so good winemakers are going to do that anyway. And we can taste wines that have been played with. You know, it's hard to taste everything, but we're pretty good at sorting through stuff and seeing which stuff has been played with, what hasn't. This one's not been played with. So the reason it doesn't say organic wine on it is because they added SO2 at the winery to preserve the wine, and that's what it's for.
I don't like the teas.
So what about this nose, huh?
Oh,
I'm
pretty.
curious what he thinks about the nose.
It's all spice. Are you getting something else in that? Are you getting some kind of blackberries?
Yeah, it must be.
It's jumping out of the glass.
Really? I'm the worst at that.
Wow. Okay, so here's the big difference besides the flavors, but when you get to the end of this wine, you get that sort of terry cloth, mouth drying sensation. And that's the tannic acid that comes from Zinfandel that's so prevalent. Good, in my opinion, good Zinfandel, particularly from this area, is going to have that. That's just the nature of where it's grown, the soil, the weather, picking conditions, all that played into one. I mean, this is the oldest wine in the group, right? 2016. Would you know that from its structure? No, you would never know. Wow. What do you guys think? Am I off base on this one? I don't know. I might take this home. I'm not sure what we're making for dinner. You know, our house has changed. I'm not sure about yours. But I go home and decide what I want to drink first. And then we decide how we're going to cook around it. Or DoorDash around it, for that matter. So, which I hate DoorDash. I just get tired of it. But that's the impact of wine in our household over the years, is that we've decided what flavors are we looking for, what feeling are we looking for before we decide what we're going to eat. And this could be tonight's choice, actually. I'm really liking this. You know, this, oh boy, and the fruit's really popping out after even just a little bit of time in the glass.
So when the label says it's from the Sierra Foothills, is that more over along Highway 49 type Sierra Foothills?
I think it's going to be closer to the Amador County.
Yeah, okay.
Right? It's a good question exactly where these grapes are from, but yes, that's generally where it's from, yeah.
Because I noticed they're in the wineries in, it says Lake County.
Now, Lake County, a little further north, I think, right?
Yes, north of Napa and
Yeah.
Sonoma.
So Lake County produces wines of this depth as well. So it's all part and parcel to the general area. I love Lake County wines, but boy, you can't. They're not for the timid, faint of heart, because they're usually pretty aggressive. Who did I buy just recently from Lake County? There's a couple wines on our list that are Lake County wines. What do you guys think of this, though?
I like it.
Yeah, I mean, this has got huge. Wow.
Of the four wines, the Pinot Noir did do a lot for me, but the other three are just, I really like.
Well, I think you're right on. The Pinot Noir is probably the simplest of the four. It's the easiest drinking. It's probably, he blended some various lots, but it's specific to Sonoma County, but it was a reasonably successful brand for us to sell. People like the softness of it, but I agree with you completely. From a complexity, interest factor, the other three are more interesting. So the last couple of minutes here, I'm going to read you something. And you can either chat us the answer or you can just chime in, okay? I'm going to make it easy. I'll give you a 33% chance of getting this right. But this is a real book. It was written in French in the 70s. It was translated to English a little bit later. He's a real MD. He's also a holistic doctor as well, as far as homeopathic stuff. So the cure, and I'm just going to pick one, happens to be earmarked already to the page that starts with F for flatulence. So, the accumulation of gas in the stomach has already been treated under the healing, blah, 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 to which the reader should refer. Here, we will consider the same problem, but localized this time in the intestine. See, he's a real doctor. So, to cure flatulence, you have the choice here, to answer the question, of the following three types of wine. You could try a Grave, which would be a red wine from the left bank of Bordeaux. You could try a Côte de Beaune, which would be the center part of the Burgundy region of France. Or you could have a dry Alsatian white, which would be something like Gewürztraminer or Riesling, but a dry version of that, which comes from the north of France. Which one of those would you take to cure the ongoing problem of flatulence in your household? Anybody care to guess? This is tough. Number 3. Marjo says number 3. That would be the Alsatian dry white. Any other ventures? Well, I wish I had a prize for you because that's right. How did you guess that? It is the dry Alsatian white. And it's because their content in mineral salts and oligo elements, which is the tactile sensation of your tongue, constitutes a precious contribution to combating any tendency towards intestinal sluggishness, which affects the smooth muscles of the digestive tube. Okay, now, all right, what is the dosage of this? You'll be glad to know that they recommend a half a bottle a day, which means maybe you'd even do better with a full bottle a day to rid you of this problem. So, well, thank you for the time today. I appreciate you chiming in. We'll be doing this every couple of weeks. We have a Bordeaux class coming up pretty soon. That'll be a lot of fun to talk about the regions of Bordeaux. And we're going to do it, again, like I said, every 2 weeks. We're going to pick a different subject, a different group of wines, and have some fun with these conversations. Any other questions?
Where is this? Are you gonna?
Everything else magazines.
No, I'm not going to ask him. I just wanted to show so we can say hi.
Just tell him hi, thank you. It's not burning.
Elizabeth can't do it.
It's not burning. I don't know why.
We're off.
We just wanted to say hi. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm glad to see you guys out there. And look forward to doing it again.
Yeah, good idea.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers, everyone. Oh, I got to have a glass.
Thank you very much. It was very good. It's interesting.
Thank you. We'll have more fun next time. Cheers. Yeah.
That was really fun. Thank you.
You're welcome.
This is the first time because I'm still.
I think it worked out all right. I keep talking, you know. It's easier when you can see who they are.